What is good, listeners of the Didn't Ask podcast? Welcome back. As always, I'm your host Djimon, and today I will be diving back into the world of Reddit to see what the people asked Reddit and didn't ask me. I did that intro a little different than I do normally, and it kind of threw me off a little bit, but hey, we live and we learn. I'm learning how this hosting thing works. We're back with another episode of the Didn't Ask podcast. I hope you had a good week. I don't want to keep you waiting long for those cool and awesome questions that I have gathered for you today, so let's jump right into the first question asked by user Keenest Derp, and they ask, what kids movie has no right to be as good as it is? There are so many kids movies that are so good and have no right to be as good as they are. And for me, when I saw this question, the first thing that came to mind was Paddington. Paddington 1 and 2 are both such highly rated movies and they're so fun. I have to be honest, I have never seen Paddington 2. Still need to do that, but I have seen Paddington 1 and I can say with all honesty, Paddington 1 is such a fun movie. It is a kids movie, but I see it more as a family movie because it's not focused necessarily on like, oh, it has to be kids. There are so many funny jokes and some jokes that you probably wouldn't get if you're a kid, but you do get as an adult. And of course, a lot of kids' movies and TV shows have that in them. But there is something that Paddington does so well that makes the movie so special. And it's just so cool to see that, a bear has such personality and can go through all these hoops and things and it still be an awesome movie from front to back. Everything makes sense. And the actors that are in the movie are fucking amazing too. Because Nicole Kidman is the villain in the first one, and Hugh Grant, I believe, is the villain in the second. It's like there are such big names attached to the Paddington movies that it's so crazy that these movies are so good. Because you would think that, oh, it's probably just a cash in. They're cashing in on the name and popularity of Paddington because, of course, it is such a big name. Like, when I was a kid 20 years ago, I was watching Paddington, and it's crazy to me that Paddington still is so popular, especially, of course, in the UK. If you go to London, like I've been a couple of times, you can walk through the shopping centers and the streets and whatever, and you will see at least one Paddington in a store. Like there are Paddington everywhere. So yeah, I will have to say those Paddington movies should be on top of your list if you have not watched them. Again, I still haven't seen two. I might do that soon because man, talking about how awesome Paddington 1 was makes me really want to watch Paddington 2. Now, I saw somebody in the comments named Moten Futon. Moten Futon. I don't know how I should say your name, but I apologize for that. But they said Monsters Inc. And yeah, Monsters Inc. Such an amazing movie. I've seen it not that long ago, and I still reference Monsters Inc. from day to day. Especially after Monsters at Work came out on Disney Plus, and Monsters at Work is it's actually like the sequel like the sequel series to Monsters Inc. where we see basically what happened like a week after Monsters Inc. took place. Because if you have seen Monsters Inc. and if you have not, what the fuck are you doing? Have you not had a childhood or anything? Because the movie is quite old. But in Monsters Inc., of course, we see how the CEO of Monsters Inc. turns out to be the bad guy and has been like extorting kids and sending them away. And I don't know, some sinister things have been going on, which results in the whole factory basically changing from scare gas to laugh gas, or at least from scare energy to laugh energy. And that basically causes a whole ripple effect with people losing their jobs and having to get re-educated on what their job actually is. And of course, with that, there also comes the technical aspects of how are we going to store this energy? Are we making enough energy? You name it. And that's where Monsters at Work comes in. And Monsters at Work is kind of like an office type. It has Mindy Kaling. And Mindy Kaling, of course, wrote on The Office and starred in The Office. And yeah, so it's about a group of the misfits, basically, that do the Monsters Inc. facilities team, MIFT, as they call themselves, MIFT. And they have to basically solve all the technical problems that arise with the new jobs and stuff like that. And it makes me think about how much I love Monsters Inc. and how much I love Monsters Inc. as a child. Because, man, those movies are good. And still watching them now, and like I said, I watched them not that long ago. Still watching them now, they're so good. There is so much emotional impact in that movie with Sully and Mike and Boo and how their relationship grows. So, yeah, Muton Futon, I have to agree with you. Monsters Inc. is really high up on there. So, thank you, Keenus the Derp 1, for your question. What kids' movie has no right to be as good as it is? And my answer would be Paddington 1 and Paddington 2. Like, they are rated as some of the best movies out there. And like Moton Fortune said, Futun, Monsters Inc., because Monsters Inc., of course, is absolutely fantastic. Moving on to question number 2. Mr. Bacon989 asks, what celebrity death hit you the hardest? And there are some celebrity deaths that hit really hard, but I would say mostly Chadwick Boseman was the one that hit really hard for me. Mostly because we, of course, nobody really knew that he was sick and that he was feeling bad and ill, and and him being such a such an icon and such an image and role model for people like me, like black people and small kids that are a different color, and you name it. It was such a moment in history where, and it is like 2 years ago now already, something like that. Like, time flies, man. But yeah, it was such a weird, surreal moment when that news came out of Chadwick Boseman dying. It was so weird because, again, he was our Black Panther. He was our king. He was basically built up to be this immortal being, and quickly we realized that no one is immortal and that everybody meets their final death. So yeah, it was really sad for the community, I would say. For me, like, it was such a weird, unreal moment where we heard Chadwick Boseman died. He has been sick for months and nobody knew, and that was just like really, really hard. And yeah, like, every time I wear my Black Panther shirt, I still, do the Wakanda symbol, like crossing my arms, basically giving myself a hug, just knowing like, hey, Chadwick Boseman did this for us, and he is such an important person in the black community that he still gets remembered for what he did and what could have been. But for now, yeah, again, we have to do it without him, sadly. But he will never be forgotten. I feel like Chadwick Boseman made such an impact on the world with what he did, being such a nice man, being there for the community, being there during events, showing that you don't have to have superpowers to be a superhero. And that's, what he did, and that's such an important thing that he did. So thank you, Chadwick, and you are certainly missed. And thank you, Mr. Bacon989, for your question. What celebrity death hit you the hardest? And it has to be Chadwick Boseman. Okay, let's bring the bring the pace a little back up. We don't have to be sad all day, but sometimes you gotta go through some emotions. So let's move on to the third question of today. This one was asked by Sputnut. They ask, congratulations, you just won a lifetime supply of the last thing you bought. What do you have? And this is kinda ironic, I guess, because I helped my mother order a cake last night. So I technically bought it, not with my own money, but I technically bought it. So I'm just gonna say that I'm gonna get a lifetime supply of red velvet drip cakes. And oh my fucking god, would I love that. I'm a big fan of red velvet cakes. They're so good and I could eat them all day basically. I mean, I say that and then I have one slice and I'm full and then don't really want to do it anymore. But yeah, like red velvet cakes are so good. So having a lifetime supply, that would be awesome. And I hope it's a lifetime supply of like, oh, I can get a cake every month or every week, preferably every week, of course. But like, so then I can just, get it out at special occasions. If I go to somebody, to meet their kid or the newborn, whatever, just bring a cake and then go, hey, here's a red velvet cake to celebrate the situation. That would be very cool, I think. So yeah, that was a quick answer to your question, Sputnut. Congratulations, you just won a lifetime supply of the last thing you bought. What do you have? And again, I technically bought a cake for my mom, even though it wasn't with my own money, but I technically did the purchasing. So I'm gonna just say that I'm gonna get a lifetime supply of red velvet drip cakes, and I am very happy with that. Thank you for your question. Going on to the fourth question of today, and this one was asked by user village underscore birder underscore 5.9, and they ask, what makes a video game more enjoyable? This is a very interesting question because you can interpret this question in many different ways. Because what makes a video game more enjoyable? And it depends on what the game is. But overall, it's of course the controls. If you have good controls in your game, then of course it will make the game more enjoyable because it makes the game more playable. If you have weird tanky ass controls and I have to fucking put my fingers in places they normally don't really go, and then it's gonna be really hard for me to be able to play your game the way you want me to because it's just, or at least me enjoying the game, it's just gonna be really hard because I have to put my fingers in places that I don't put them and it's just uncomfortable. So I rather skip out on that. And then, of course, you have games that are coming back to the fact that what makes a game more enjoyable. It's like it depends on what the game is. Because if it's a story driven game, then I would say surprise moments make the game more enjoyable. Things happen that you don't expect. A great example for this is The Last of Us Left Behind. So it's The Last of Us Left Behind is the expansion that The Last of Us 1 got, where you play as Ellie, and it's basically at the start of the outbreak. So there are things happening and things have happened, but we're not really deep in the mud. And in that chapter, you play as Ellie with her friend Riley, and they go to an arcade and whatever. And the whole experience for The Last of Us is, of course, based on basically death. The story is about love, but it's being surrounded by death, not only literally, but also physically. Because, of course, there are clickers and infected around you, which basically dead. And then, of course, there's a lot of people dying, and you're always thinking about that. But in that certain chapter of Left Behind, you actually get the opportunity to play with a water gun. And it's such an interesting moment, because of course it uses the gameplay that you have known from The Last of Us, because it's just the shooting mechanics, but it makes it interesting because it gives it a twist with it being a squirt gun and not a actual gun. And there are things like that that can make a game more enjoyable. You can also look at it in another way where a game for me becomes more enjoyable when it's easy or at least doable to get the unlockables and collectibles that are available. So, for example, I just finished Spider Man Miles Morales not that long ago and platinumed that game. And with that game, it was very much like, as well as the original Spider Man, that being said, it was very much an easy and enjoyable trip for me to collect everything in the game. Because in some games, like, I don't know, The Witcher, it's very much based in reality in the sense that, hey, this is quote unquote a real world, so you have to figure things out and you will find secrets basically on your own by exploring whatever. In Spider Man Miles Morales, and again, the original Spider Man that came out on PS4, they make it so that you can see all the collectibles once you have unlocked that certain collectible. So in Spider Man Miles Morales, you can collect postcards. That's one thing that comes to mind immediately. But when you trigger the first postcard in like just the story mode, it unlocks all the postcards throughout the whole map. And that makes the experience so much better and so much more enjoyable because I don't have to be frustratingly swinging around New York trying to find something or having to use a guide to find the other thing. I can just do what the game says, like, oh, this is here, just go here and you will find it. And that makes for me the experience way more enjoyable because it just takes the, I don't want to necessarily say effort, but like it takes the frustrating parts out and therefore it becomes more enjoyable because I don't have to be stressing, don't have to have a fucking phone open while also looking at my tablet while also playing the game, and those things just don't work. So I think that that is what makes the game more enjoyable for me. So coming back to the question asked by a user, village underscore burner underscore 59, what makes a video game more enjoyable? And I would say it depends on what type of game it is. For a more story driven game, it for me is a surprise element or a surprise twist that makes you think differently about the game, or at least makes it different than what you think it was going to be. And option two for me is that it should be easy to get collectibles and I don't need to have 18 different tabs open on my phone to make sure that I get every collectible. Because similar thing happened with God of War, where I wanted to go for the platinum and I had to pick up Odin's Ravens, and those were sons of bitches, and it took me such a long time because the map doesn't show you where the crows are, so you have to teleport to a certain part of the map, then walk around, make sure that you don't miss it, and then hope that you pick everything up that you need. And oh man, it's such a chore. So that would be my answer to you, village underscore burner underscore 59. Thank you for your question. Moving on to the final question of the Ask Reddit subreddit for today, and this one was asked by user Violet Dragons, and they ask, what is taboo but should be considered normal? I would basically say, and I'm gonna make this very short because I'm very afraid that I'm gonna make this a very long podcast and I don't really got time for that, sadly, today. But I'm gonna just be short about this question, and for me, it's basically everything that has to do with the female body. We, as a society, have deemed women basically dirty for some sort of reason. I personally don't understand it, but we're looking at like tampons and pads and menstrual cups and you name it. We see that as nasty and as dirty and as not supposed to be there and whatever. But it's just like their bodies and they're doing what has to be done for the person to be healthy. So I personally don't really understand why we consider that a taboo. Why is it such a weird thing for a girl to say, "Oh, I need to just go to the bathroom, change my pad or whatever"? I personally don't really understand why that is such a bad thing, or why we consider that a bad thing, because it isn't. It is something that happens. It is something that is natural. And yeah, I feel like there are, of course, moments where maybe you should say something and you shouldn't say something depending on the situation, but I don't feel like we should put women in a corner because they have bodies that do certain things that men's bodies don't do. That makes no sense to me. So, Violet Dragons, what is taboo but should be considered normal? And I would say basically everything that has to do with the female body, because for some sort of reason we don't talk about the female body enough to consider normal things normal. Because why is women menstruating a weird thing? Why is everything that comes with that a weird thing? Why are certain womb diseases, if you say that, like, like certain illnesses that only occur in women, why are those things considered bad when the same thing, like a similar thing, could happen to a man and that's fine? Like, we need to be better to women, and we need to be better at giving them a safe space to talk about these things, in my opinion. Thank you for your question. And now, moving on to the final question of today. This one, of course, coming from the MIDSO subreddit, and this one was asked by user Murky-Highway 9740. And they ask, "Am I the asshole for telling my wife it's embarrassing she gave our daughter's bus driver cookies?" Some important details. My wife is very shy but enjoys giving, and is all gung ho about showing appreciation to workers she assumes aren't appreciated or recognized. She tries to pass these beliefs on to our kids. Because she's too silent to show her appreciation, she does it through gifts, usually baked goods. I've been embarrassed about it in the past. Our oldest rode the school bus for the first time. My wife was waiting at the stop with our daughter and have her hand the bus driver a bag of homemade cookies. And then when she picked her up from the stop in the afternoon, she gave a bag to the afternoon driver. I asked why she did that, when she could easily have just said thank you and left it at that. She said the bus drivers work so hard having to comfort all these nervous kids and handling the unbehaved ones while driving. They deserve more than a thanks. I reminded her that this has embarrassed me in the past, and I think her behaviors are too extreme. I wouldn't want gifts from someone I don't know. She ignored how I felt. I contacted some people in my life to see if I was just the crazy one, and most of my friends and mom agree. My wife's way of showing thanks just makes everyone uncomfortable. Am I the asshole? And I would say, yeah, you're a bit of the asshole. Like, your wife is trying to say thanks in the way that she knows how. She is not spending an exorbitant amount of money. She's making cookies for these drivers. And if that's the worst thing that your wife's doing, then I would say, dude, calm down. Because you're saying that your wife is embarrassing you by giving somebody a gift. If giving somebody a gift is embarrassing to you, I feel like you have to look in the mirror very, very deeply. Because it's not embarrassing. She's just a very concerned mother. And again, she is just trying to give thanks to people that probably won't get thanked very often. And if it's by giving cookies, that's fine. Because the thing is, what for you might be this weird, small, embarrassing thing, it could be huge for the driver that hasn't gotten anything in his life and is just driving with these screaming shitty kids in the back, trying to make sure that everybody is safe. And that's also a thing. You're putting your child's life in the hands of this bus driver. So if your wife want to give this person cookies, let your wife give them cookies, because they get your kids home safe and to school safely. So, are you the asshole, Murky Highway 9740? Yes, I would say you are. I feel like you're making such a big deal out of this relatively small gesture that your wife is doing. And again, it's to me not an embarrassing fact what she's doing. There is nothing embarrassing about giving somebody a gift. You could say, "Oh, I'm embarrassed when your wife walks without a shirt or something." Then you can say, "Oh, I'm a little bit embarrassed by that." But I don't feel like giving a driver some cookies is embarrassing. Like seriously, you should get your head out of your ass, Murky Highway. Because if this is what you're concerned about and you feel embarrassed by your wife giving somebody cookies, then oh, there is some real world shit out there for you. But thank you for your question anyways. And that was it for the Didn't Ask podcast for this week. Maybe a little shorter episode than normal, but I feel like you still get all the entertainment out of it that you really want. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a rating on Apple Podcast so I can read your rating in the next episode when I see it. Also, if you want to hear the older episodes, you can visit Didn't Ask Podcast on any of your favorite podcast apps. You can also go to anchor.fm/didn't-ask-pod. Over here, you can find all the old episodes, but you also have the ability to ask a question to me personally. On the website, there is a button that you can press, and then you can do a voice recording so I can play that voice recording on the podcast. If you don't want that, that's no big deal. You can just say upfront that, hey, I want you to answer my question, but I don't really want to be heard on the podcast. That's totally fine by me. If you say it upfront, I will make sure that your question gets answered, but I will just read out the question for you instead. I will be back next week, and in the meantime, you can see what I'm watching using track.tv. That link will be in the show description, as well as the link to the YouTube channel. And if you're there, please subscribe if you're there anyways. That is everything I had to say and get off my chest. I will be back next week. So until then, enjoy your week, and I'll see you back next time. Goodbye.